Hello and welcome to the Lord of Dragons. I'm your host Jack, and this is my Season 2, Episode 1 review. Episode 1 starts out in the beautiful forest around Winterfell, where we see a raven, and it is carrying a message off towards the wall. It's good to be back in the north and back in Winterfell, where we start off to the voice of Cregan Stark. Cregan's telling us about the Night's Watch. On the onset of winter, 1 in every 10 men must be chosen to serve in the Night's Watch to protect against the dark and the cold, not as a sentence but as an honor. Jay says how he's cold to the bone, and Cregan says, "This is only a light summer snow, my prince." Jay says, "Surely Torrhen Stark would have rather died than bent the knee to the Conqueror unless he was sure that he could bring unity to the realm." And he says that unity is now threatened. Cregan says that Starks never forget their oaths, but that his gaze is forever torn between north and south. In the end, he offers 2,000 grizzled graybeards to fight with Rhaenyra's side. And there's a great story behind the graybeards. Every winter, when they run out of food in the families and the snow gets too deep and winter too long, they decide that they're going to leave the family so they don't consume any more of the family's food, basically. And the old men leave the hut for the last time and wander off, never to return. And so by joining Rhaenyra's war, this is a way for them to die with honor without having to just walk off into nothing and do nothing. They're going to walk off into this war and they're going to fight like hell because they don't plan on going home in the first place. And when that time does come, the Winter Wolves, which they call themselves, are led by Sir Roderick Dustin of House Dustin from Barrowton. Cregan talks about how his father brought King Jaehaerys and his Queen Alysanne to the very spot that they are standing in, and that they watched as the greatest power in the world, their dragons, refused to cross beyond the wall. Alysanne was disturbed by this and really couldn't forget her trip to the wall, and forever after she made great pledges to the wall and to make sure they got the men and the money they needed. At that point, the message finally arrives that the Raven was bringing in the opening scene, and we see that it's a message from Dragonstone, and there's a concerned look on Cregan's face as he hands it to Jace, and that is Jace receiving the news of his brother's death. And the next scene we see is Rhaenys coming back to Dragonstone on Meleys, and she shows how they enter Dragonstone on their dragons, and it's really cool because you never thought of this before, how they have this door, they fly inside the side of the mountain, and then the dragon lands, and then the rider gets off there in this little concrete area. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool what they've done already this season. I like it. And so Rhaenys has been out patrolling the Gullet. The Gullet is a little clip there where Blackwater Bay connects to the sea, and all the ships going into King's Landing have to go through the Gullet. And so while the ships are there protecting a lot of it, Rhaenys is flying back and forth over about 100-mile stretch and looking for any ships trying to enter King's Landing, and they're not letting any ships in, and the Valyrian fleet, they're stopping any ships that try and enter the city. And they're searching all of them, stopping all of them, searching the contents. But as Rhaenys arrives there, Prince Daemon, of course, is waiting for her, and he says, "Get back on your dragon, we're going to King's Landing." And she says, "I've been patrolling the Gullet, I'm tired, Meleys is tired, we're both hungry, we need a break." And he says, "We're going to King's Landing, and we're going to take on Vhagar. I can't do it alone. I can't take on the hoary bitch alone." And Rhaenys asks, "Is that the Queen's command?" And Daemon's pissed, he says she's been gone for days now, and she put herself at risk being out there in the open, and while she's following her heart, she's shirking off her queenly duties because, Rhaenys is trying to explain explains she just found out that her son is dead in a letter. She needs to know that he's actually dead. She needs to see some proof, his body, something. And she explains how that's what it took for her when Lena died. The letter wasn't enough. She had to see her remains before she accepted that she was actually gone. Daemon says that she was a fool to go alone. You know, what if she runs into Aemon and Vhagar? And Rhaenys said, I would pity Aemon if that happened. And so Daemon also goes on to explain, you know, Rhaenys, if you had just killed Aegon when you had the chance, Luke would still be alive. To which Rhaenys just kind of smirks and walks away. She's not going to put up with Daemon's bullshit, and Daemon tries to command her to fly with him, and she says, would that you were the king, and walks off. We get a quick glimpse of Rhaenyra searching for Luke before we jump over to Spicetown, where Alan of Hull is there working on ships. They're cleaning off the barnacles and the blood and fixing the ships of the Velaryon fleet when Corlys walks up and takes a look at what is left of his ship, talks about how he's surprised that it got back there at all, and Alan hands him this knife, and it turns out the knife he had made for Prince Lucerys. He was going to give it to him when he took over Driftmark or something like that. And now he's sad that Lucerys is gone. Also mentions to Alan, you're the one that pulled my body from the water, right? I owe you a debt. And Alan says, just doing my duty, you know, and we'll try and fix your ship sooner. Seems like Alan knows who Corlys is, but Corlys doesn't know who Alan is yet. And if you notice, they made Alan a lot older than I would have thought he would be. And I think that's to clear up the fact that he's definitely not Laenor's child, because he's as old as Laenor, if not older than Laenor. And I think they used an older actor just to clear up that point, in my opinion. And so he's fixing up ships. He's going to have a bigger role to come, and we'll see his brother Adam coming up too, and they both have a much bigger role to come in the Dance of Dragons, and so we will see that as it happens. And so we jump over to King's Landing, where Sir Eric or Sir Arik, I still get them mixed up. One of them is the one on Team Green, at least. He's up there on the battlements with his troops, and they are scanning the skies and manning the scorpions, and suddenly the men are screaming, dragon, dragon, and it turns out it's just Aemon on Vhagar returning to the city, and that's all we see of those guys for now, before we jump over to the next clip. And in the next clip, we see King Aegon headed to his room, and Queen Helena doing some of her cross-stitching or something like that, needlepoint, and he is looking for Prince Jaehaerys, and he wants to take him to the council meeting with him, because his father, you know, King Viserys, never did that with him, and so he wants to do that with his son to kind of make a point. And Helena says he's in the library in his lessons right now, you shouldn't bother him, and Aegon's really pushy and says, you know, where is he? I'm taking him. And Helena says, what if he doesn't want to go? And so Aegon insists, and Helena takes it upon herself at that moment to tell him that she's afraid. And King Aegon says, well, don't be afraid, we've got Vhagar here. The dragons aren't going to come as long as Vhagar's here. And she says, well, I'm not afraid of the dragons, I'm afraid of the rats. And everyone starts looking around for rats, her handmaidens, and Aegon. And he says, the queen's an enduring mystery, right? And so next, we see Alicent and Sir Criston, and guess what they're doing? And so in season 1, it seemed like there was kind of a hidden thing between Alicent and Criston. We weren't sure if it was there. She's still married, the king's still alive. Well, now Viserys is dead, and there is definitely something going on with Alicent and Sir Criston, and probably a lot of somethings, because we actually see them going at it twice in this episode. So the scene we see is Sir Criston's going down on Queen Alicent, and afterwards she says, we can't do this anymore. Kind of that typical thing. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And he's putting his armor back on, and he's like, we're late for a council meeting. And that's that right there. It kind of makes Alicent look like a hypocrite. And you can see how the season's already changing. You're starting to see Alicent almost relaxing more like Rhaenyra was, and Rhaenyra's getting more tense like Alicent used to be. So there's kind of an opposite role happening here. But anyway, now we jump over to the council meeting, and Alicent arrives there finally after finishing up with Sir Criston. And so right away, Otto's already there. Jasper Wilde, of course, is there and smarts off about how they didn't get a response to Rhaenyra's letters. They sent 3 letters to Rhaenyra since Luke's death, only to get no response. And Jasper Wilde makes a joke about how she's not, going to respond to the letters about her dead son. And Grand Maester Orwyle is also there, and he says, we can assume it means that war is inevitable. And Aegon shows up with his boy, with Prince Jaehaerys. Prince Jaehaerys is playing with the little ball thing that they each have a marble ball they put down and they want to talk. And Prince Jaehaerys keeps playing with Tywin Lannisters, and Tywin's getting pissed about it and getting loud and yelling about it. And finally, King Aegon gets pissed about it and says, you know what, you're going to be his royal steed then. You're going to give him a pony ride. And you can see everyone in the council is kind of like, what the fuck, what, what? And finally, Alicent intercedes and says, we've got important business despite Tywin's interruptions. And so Aegon lets him sit down, and they continue, and Jaehaerys leaves the council chamber, and not long thereafter, Aemon comes in. You can tell Alicent's very pissed and has a lot of hostility towards Aemon about him killing Luke. She's not happy about it. She thinks it has made them look bad and has kind of ruined their image. Not that they had a great one to begin with as usurpers of the throne, but killing one of their own, killing their kin, is a bad, much worse look, I guess you could say, right? It definitely is. We'll just say it definitely is. Aegon, he's talking about how him and Vhagar and Aemon, they're gonna go on their dragons, and they're gonna go burn up the fleet that's holding up the gullet, and they're gonna go do their thing, and everyone's kind of like, good. And Sir Criston speaks up and says, Your Grace, you're the king, you gotta stay here, we need you here. And Aegon's not really about that. Oddly enough, Aemon's plan is the same as Daemon's, that they need to take Harrenhal because it is the key to the Riverlands, a toehold in the Riverlands, and the Riverlands are key to everywhere else in the realm. There's a lot of people in the Riverlands. It's a huge area, and so it's funny, his plan is literally exactly the same as Prince Daemon's. We'll have to see which one of them gets to Harrenhal first, I guess, right? You can tell Aegon's bored already in the council meeting, and Otto's just kind of going on about how, you've shown your might already. We know Vhagar's strong. Now we just need to wait. All the lords, they're going to come to our side. All the lords of the realm. I've sent many ravens everywhere, and you just wait. They're going to show up and come. We don't need to do anything. And Aegon's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Okay, this is ridiculous. As soon as the meeting's over, they follow Alicent on out, and who's waiting for her but the clubfoot Larys Strong. And he tells her, I've been looking into all the ladies of your household and the ones that pose a threat, and, well, they're all dead now. Alicent says, what of them? He says, well, they don't breathe our air anymore, but the good news is I've replaced them all, and and I chose them all myself. All your new ladies of your household, I've hand-chosen myself. And you can tell Alicent isn't thrilled about that. And he also makes a comment about trying to come to see her before the council meeting, and it's a way of him saying, I know what you were doing with Sir Criston before the meeting. And so she's not happy. She knows that he's got her now. She's under Larys's nasty old club foot, which means having to show her feet. I don't know. But they jump to her in the bathtub, and she's looking at all her new handmaids and ladies around her, and she's just getting flustered and pissed, and she tells them all to leave, to get out, get out. She wants to be in peace. She doesn't trust them already. She's not happy about the situation. After that, we go back to Rhaenyra, where she is finally sees a group of people there looking at something on the beach. Nyr storms in, and she finally realizes she's found Luke's body, or what's left of it, or Vermax's body, and they show a group of people there, and they're like, look, it's a dragon wing, and they're pulling it out of the water, and suddenly they look up and shout, dragon, and Rhaenyra flies down there with some fury. She lands Syrax with this thump and a roar and sends stuff flying and everyone running, and then she jumps up and slides down Syrax's wing like some badass, like she's done this a billion times, and all the people around, they've just scattered away, and she goes down there and she realizes, yeah, she's found something. She finds the wing. It's a piece of Arrax, and, she knows that Luke has in fact died, and she looks further, and there's some torn pieces of Luke's clothing and his cloak and tunic and stuff, and so she basically breaks down and is just crying there on the beach. You can tell she's completely heartbroken, but she's finally found what she's looking for, so that's the good side of it. And all the people that scattered are kind of standing over there to the side, watching her weep over her son's remains. And as she's weeping, Syrax lets out a dragon roar, that just a loud screech, because I do believe Arrax was one of Syrax's babies, so they're both kind of mothers that have lost their babies. Rhaenyra and Syrax, Luke and Arrax, that's the whole deal going on there. And so it's a sad, sad scene. After that, we go to Aegon entering the throne room. He's got his two buddies with him. They're talking off gibberish, announcing Aegon using the word magnanimous. And Aegon's like, what the hell does that mean? And they don't know. They just made up a word. And he's there to meet his first petitioners to the throne, the small folk, the lords, whatever. They're there to make their petitions and speak to the king and ask their questions. And so Aegon knows his buddies are watching. He sits all cool and he wants to play it cool. And the first guy looks really nervous, and he tells him, come on up. Don't be afraid. It's cool. What's your name? And he says, Gerard. And he says, what's up, Gerard? What can I do for you? And he says, well, the crown, they took 1/10 of my flock, and I, kind of need my flock. And and Aegon's like, oh, well, we should give them back then, right? And he's completely aware that all his buddies are still watching, and he's like, yeah, we should give your sheep back to you. And suddenly Otto is coming towards him, and he's like, your grace, we took the sheep because we're certain pretty much that war is going to break out and the dragons are going to need more food than usual. And Aegon's like, oh, well, couldn't we just give his sheep back since he came all this way? And Otto's like, if we give his sheep back, then everyone will be lining up to get their sheep back. Aegon's like, well, how will they know, though? And Otto says, when the king speaks, everyone hears. And you can tell Aegon just has no idea whatsoever what he's doing. Otto, he steps back down, and the next guy, he comes up and says, well, something about the ships not getting through, and Aegon's like, oh, I'm going to send Vhagar to burn the blockade in the gullet next. And the third guy that comes up is Hugh the Hammer, who we're going to meet a bit more in depth here soon, because Hugh turns out to be one of the Dragon Seeds, a future dragon rider. He will be the new rider of Vermithor in future episodes. But this is the first time we meet him. He's a smith, and he says, we're happy to help you and all, but it takes weeks to build one scorpion alone, and you're expecting us to do it, and then you'll pay for the weapons. But it would really help if you gave us the money first, because the cost of iron is rising. The cost of materials is going up, and we don't have enough to cover the cost of the iron ourselves to build the weapons. And Aegon says, well, you'll get paid, and paid good, because we need you. And he looks over, and Otto's about to come up to whisper to him again, and he insists that they need the help of the small folk if they're going to win the war. And he's very insistent upon that point, and doesn't want to be embarrassed by Otto in front of his friends again. After Aegon gets done with all his petitioners finally and leaves the throne room, who does he bump into waiting for him? But of course, the clubfoot Larys Strong, who talks about, I noticed it's hard to get stuff past the hand, and he was up there in the galleys watching everything happen. Clubfoot finally gets to his point and says, Otto was your father's hand, meaning, he doesn't have to be your hand. So you can see he's already putting some thoughts into Aegon's head and Alicent's head, and he's getting his dirty little clubfoot into everything already. So now we finally go to where Alicent is waiting for Otto to arrive, and she's mad, she's pissed. She says, I requested an audience hours ago, and he said there were many, many petitioners today. Well, she's pissed about the small council meeting. She thinks that her own father is undermining her in front of all the men, and that her and him should be in this little thing together, where they're kind of controlling Aegon together, and she thinks Otto is undermining her. She wants to know what he sees happening, and he wants to know what she sees happening. So you can see there's already a lot of backstabbing going on, a lot of chaos going on with inside of Team Green, and she's trying to warm Otto over, the boys look up to you, the hand to three kings, and blah blah blah, and then he says this line from the previews, the path to victory now is one of violence, and do you get that now? Like, do you see that? So next we jump over to the Valyrian fleet, and they are still blocking the gullet. We're at the blockade, and they are looking through every ship trying to get through. And it shows Sir Eric or Sir Auric, whichever one's for Team Black this time. And he's looking through the cargo of one of these ships with some of the Valyrians. And who does he find in there but Lady Misery, Mysaria, the White Worm. And she is there crouched in hiding. And she says, last time I saw you, there were two of you. And so she is sent to speak with none other than Prince Daemon, of course. And Daemon is none too happy to see her. And so Prince Daemon wants to know who set her free, how she got there, if she's been taking Hightower coin, what secrets she's been selling. And she really doesn't deny it. She just kind of says, I merely profited off of what was going to happen anyway. And he's mad. He knows that she helped sort of put Aegon on the throne, if you will, and she could have, done something else, but he is none too happy to see her, and he wants her locked up as a traitor. He explains how she's just fodder, sort of like Otto's fodder to her, and she's fodder to Daemon, and she just wanted to make what money she could while she could, and now her house was burnt by Otto after he used her, and so she's there, obviously hoping to get gain favor under Queen Rhaenyra. Sir Eric, or Sir Auric, whichever one's for Team Black, tells Daemon, she's telling the truth, and Daemon's pissed at him now. Still pissed at everyone because Rhaenyra's not back, and he says, what's it your business? You could have killed Aegon yourself. Why didn't you kill Aegon when you had the chance? And basically Sir Eric or Sir Auric just says, we're sworn to protect all of you, and what are we supposed to do when you guys start fighting each other? It's not an easy decision for us at all to decide which one do we protect, which one do we fight or kill, or do we run? And he says, I left my brother behind, I left the Kingsguard behind, and I'm here now, so. And Daemon, he doesn't care. But their conversation is interrupted by the sound of an approaching dragon, and it's none other than Rhaenyra finally. Queen Rhaenyra has returned to Dragonstone, and she makes her landing and comes in and heads straight for a council meeting, or the council's already there waiting for her, funny enough, and Daemon stops her and asks her if she found what she was looking for, and she nods that she did, and she heads right up to the council table, and Daemon says he's ready to go to Harrenhal, and Rhaenys says we've got the blockade in place in the gullet, and they kind of sit and wait to see what Rhaenyra is going to say, a very disheveled looking Rhaenyra who, just got off her dragon, and she just kind of stands there and says, I want Prince Aemond, and that's it, and she walks away. And you can tell Daemon's very pleased by that. He wants to get Prince Aemond for her. He is ready to finally go into action. This is the moment he has been waiting for. And so now that he knows that he can act finally, or do something, or get Prince Aemond for her, he goes back to Lady Mysaria, the White Worm, where he's got her down in the cells of Dragonstone. Want to use you for your secrets or whatever. And she goes, go scheme somewhere else, Daemon. I'm not interested. And he says, fine, a transaction then. Your knowledge for your life. And she clearly agrees. After that, we see that Prince Jacaerys has finally returned or arrived at Dragonstone. He goes in to see Rhaenyra, and she's sitting there, and he tries to tell her how they have the Vale, that the Lady Arryn will send troops and fight with her as long as she sends them a dragon to protect the Vale. So she wants a dragon there, and that does end up happening eventually. I think Joffrey or one of them goes there. We'll find out either later this season or next season. And then he says, and Lord Stark's going to send 2,000 men, but he breaks down in the middle of trying to tell her, and she comes up, and there's a tearful, very heartbreaking reunion scene between the two of them. It's really some amazing acting by Emma Darcy and Harry Collette. Like, if there's a scene they should win an award for, it's probably that one, because it looked very good, and that's basically it. He's returned, and he's telling her, we've got the support of the North finally. We've got people helping, and they are very distraught, clearly, at Luke's death, and so they are going to hold a little ceremony and burn the remains of Arrax and the robes and the rest of Luke's clothes. And while they're having their little ceremony, Alicent is headed to the Sept in King's Landing, and they kind of show the scenes back to back together where she's lighting candles and they are holding the fire for Luke's ceremony on Dragonstone. And I think these scenes are just kind of meant to mirror each other, and you see kind of Joffrey there in part of the scene, and Rhaena and Baela, but Alicent's lighting candles, and she lights one for Viserys, and then at the end she lights one for Lucerys Velaryon Luke, and she's lighting that candle as Rhaenyra is putting his robe in the fire, and that is basically how they are mirroring those two scenes over one another, how Alicent has changed and how Rhaenyra has changed, and they are both taking on the dance as different people with different feelings about what is actually taking place and happening. And so next we see Prince Daemon, and he has already left Dragonstone, and and is already arriving in King's Landing. Whatever Mysaria did, she found him somebody to talk to, and he goes up and finds a locked gate and has money and gets one of the Gold Cloak commanders to come up to the gate at the side of a bag of gold, and he realizes it's his former Lord Commander, and Daemon says, I hear you hold this light now for the High Towers or whatever, and the guard says, fuck the High Towers, and so that is the guard that's going to end up being Blood from the Blood and Cheese duo, and Daemon then finds Cheese, who I think is who Mysaria set him up with, and Cheese is a rat catcher in the Red Keep and knows his way around Maegor's tunnels, which is what Daemon starts to ask him about as the three of them get together in the back alleys of Flea Bottom, and he says, I know the tunnels better than I know my own cock, so I'm your man there, and Daemon says, this is my friend, pointing to Blood, and he's going to be your friend tonight, and you guys are going to go kill Prince Aemon. He's blonde and got one eye, so he shouldn't be too hard to find, and Cheese says, what if we can't find him? And Daemon kind of smiles, but you don't hear what his answer is. You don't get to hear his response. You only get to see what the end result of their work is. So we don't know. People assume he said any son will do, or the head of any son will do. A son for a son, bring me the head of any son. Other people think he didn't say that. I kind of imagine he did, because that's exactly what they do. They take the head of a different son when they can't find Aemon, because, I don't know, Aemon's either not there or something like that. Or I think he had actually just been in his room right when they get there, but we do have a couple more scenes before we get to Blood and Cheese. Yeah, the next scene is Aemon in his room talking with Sir Criston Cole, and they're laying out their plans for how they should go about moving forward, and Sir Criston says, we got Rosby and Stokeworth right here. They'd be really good castles to take. They're right in the shadow of King's Landing, and we could add their levies to our own levies, add troops to our own troops. And so they're both kind of about that idea, but then Aemon gets to talking about Otto and Alicent, how he's not happy with them, and how he's not happy with his mom. She's blaming him for Luke, yet she was plotting with the council to overthrow Rhaenyra after Viserys died, and so he thinks it's more her fault, and Sir Criston, he's doing his best to stand up for her, because he's still butthurt that Rhaenyra wouldn't be a spice merchant with him long ago, so he is saying, Alicent got caught up in Rhaenyra's web a long time ago, and she's still messed up from it, she's still just messed up from Rhaenyra. That's why she does the things she does. And Aemon says, yeah, she's a fool, she has love for the enemy, and I don't think Sir Criston likes hearing Alicent be called a fool, because, they're screwing now. But of course, it's not very long into their little meeting before they're interrupted by Otto Hightower, who comes on into the room and kind of just takes it upon himself to start looking over the plans they're laying, and he tells Sir Criston that he can go back to his post and he wants to talk to Aemon alone, and he explains to Aemon that he really hopes that they're not planning anything behind the hand and the king's back to retaliate in any way, and that they've already shown force and that now they need to be patient and wait it out. And Aemon doesn't really seem to care. He just says, I'm loyal to my family, and that's about it. There's really not much love at all between these two characters, you can tell. I think Aemon knows how conniving Otto is. Otto calls Aemon the greatest single power in the realm. And so the next scene jumps over to Blood and Cheese, and they are together, and they are actively heading into the Red Keep. They have entered into the sewer system somewhere there in Flea Bottom, and they're heading on into the castle through Magor's tunnels, which Cheese knows by heart. And for some reason, they have a dog with them. I'm not sure why they take the dog. I think for appearances. He's got all his rat traps with him too. And they go quite a ways in, and then they have to cross the throne room. And who's sitting in the throne room, of course, but King Aegon. And even though it's nighttime, he's sitting there drunk with a couple of his buddies, and they're drinking in the throne room, like shit-faced completely, not paying any attention to Blood and Cheese, walking around with the rat traps. They walk right across the throne room with the rat traps, and Aegon never looks up, never says a word, never notices him. He's just going on to his buddies about how loyal his brother is and how he could sick him and Vhagar on anybody, and Aemon would do it, and they're just having a good old time, and they have no idea what is literally walking right in front of them and what's about to happen. After they get so far, though, you can tell Cheese seems to be getting a little nervous because he's not supposed to go upstairs, and he says, you know, the royals are upstairs, and Blood's kind of like, well, right, so that's where we need to go, and Cheese is like, I'm not supposed to. Blood's like, well, if you want to kill a freaking royal, where do you think you're going to find him? But, you know, how are you going to do it if you don't go upstairs? And Cheese is like, well, I got you this far. I thought you were going to handle the rest. And Blood about strangles him and says, I could, you know, kill you now and take all the money and go get the head myself and take the rest of the money and blah, blah, blah. And Cheese is like, all right, fine. You know, I'll take you up there. I just don't entirely know my way around. But he does take him up there, and they come through a wall at the top of these stairs, and they enter right into Aemon's room. So it's like Aemon didn't even know there was a secret passageway into his bedroom, and Aemon's not in the room anymore. There's no one in the room except Blood and Cheese now. And so now they are in the royals' quarters, and they begin to look around for someone to kill, preferably Aemon. And they enter one room, and Blood tells Cheese to start setting some traps for appearances. And as Blood's looking around, he actually bumps into one of Helena's handmaids, and he just kind of wiggles the traps in her face and says, for the rats, and pretends like he's setting a rat. And she seems a little suspicious, but she walks off anyway, and then he rolls his torch away and goes about his business trying to find somebody to kill when he comes across Cheese, and Cheese is holding a knife to Helena's throat. And Blood is immediately pissed and says, you know, he said a son for a son, that's not a son. And Cheese points over to two beds where Prince Jaehaerys and Princess Jaehaera are both sleeping. And Blood goes over and looks, and he can't tell which one's a boy and which one's a girl. And he says the mother'll know, though. And when they ask Helena to tell him which is which, she tries to give him a necklace and says it's very valuable, and Blood takes the necklace anyway and says, yeah, but it's not a son. And so finally she points to Jaehaerys the right time, you know, and Blood thinks she's lying and says she wouldn't give up the heir that quick, but Cheese believes her. He looks her in the eyes and he knows she's telling the truth, and so they begin to kill Prince Jaehaerys. They put their hand over his throat and begin cutting his head off. Before Helena has even left the room, she grabs Princess Jaehaera out of her bed and flees with her while they're still cutting off Prince Jaehaerys' head, and she flees the room, and she kind of flees through the hallways like she's in a panic and doesn't know where she's going or what to do. This thing that she's dreamt about for many, many years, like her worst nightmare, has just happened right before her eyes, and she doesn't know what to do. She's in shock and yet oddly calm at the same time. And finally, she runs into her mother's room. She runs into Queen Alicent's room, and is Queen Alicent sleeping? No, she is riding Sir Criston Cole, of course. The second time they hook up in this one first episode. And so Helena about turns and leaves the room, but she just sits down on the floor with Princess Jaehaera and starts rocking. Alicent sits up and she's throwing clothes on, and Kristen's throwing clothes on. She says, Helena, what's the matter? And Helena finally says, they killed the boy. And that's where the episode ends. Episode 1 of Season 2 of House of the Dragon. It was an amazing episode, a totally loaded episode. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it already, but if you haven't, definitely try to watch it before episode 2 comes out here in a couple of days. Definitely check it out. If you can't, you can watch some of my other videos on this channel. I've got some videos that go over all of Season 2 of House of the Dragon using the book Fire and Blood. I go over everything that's going to happen in 2-part videos. So you can check those 2 videos out if you want to know what's going to happen all throughout Season 2 or get a jump start on it, or if you can't watch the show. And here in the next few days, I will be releasing my Season 3 video, getting a jump start on what's going to happen in Season 3 of House of the Dragon. So make sure you look for that here in a couple of days and check that out, because it's going to be a really good one. Got a lot of good artwork in there. It's going to be a really long video, but a great video, and it'll get you through Season 3, and then I'm going to be making the Season 4 video where I think those seasons will begin and end and what happens in the books. Obviously, what's going on the show is a little different from the books already, like the way Blood and Cheese happened. Maelor wasn't there, obviously. Somebody said they didn't think Maelor will ever show up. I don't know if that'll be or not, because there is a bigger scene that he would supposed to be in Season 3 of House of the Dragon. So if he's not there, it would be quite a big difference. It would change a few scenes for sure. So I don't know. I think Maelor will probably show up in Season 3, and the timelines changed a little bit between the book and the show, but I really like how they're doing things now. There's no more gigantic time jumps. We're just in the moment, in the war, going along with what's happened. Season 2 here picks up just a few days where Season 1 ended, and so it's only been just a few days and, no big time jumps, so it's kind of cool. Finally, we get to watch the content of the Dance of the Dragons, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, slap a like on it and subscribe to the channel. It helps a ton with a new channel like mine. I really appreciate you all watching. Check out my other videos and keep an eye out for the Season 3 video, and I will see all of you guys here again on Lord of the Dragons really soon. Have a good one, guys. Bye.